Hey there, bit of a change of pace today. Normally on this channel, I make videos that are relatively short and scripted, and today's video is neither of those. I wanted to tell the story of my friend, Dr. Susie Wiles, and I realized that the absolute best way to do that is to have her tell you her own story in her own words. So the bulk of this video is a conversation that Susie and I had about what she's been through in the past few years. And I think it's a fascinating and necessary conversation about science communication and harassment and the rights of workers. It kind of goes all over the place. So I really hope that you watch the entirety of this video. But I did want to give you the TLDW here at the start because I know that you don't normally come to this channel to watch an hour and a half long conversation. So basically, Susie was the most visible science communicator in New Zealand in 2020. So she became the face of taking precautions against COVID. And she helped guide the country through COVID-19, developing educational tools that ended up being used worldwide. So not only did she absolutely save lives in New Zealand, but she also helped save lives throughout the rest of the world. Much like what happened here in the United States with conspiracy theorists targeting Dr. Anthony Fauci, Susie became the target of an avalanche of harassment and threats. At the same time, her university refused to provide her with any kind of help to deal with that harassment, and so she ended up fighting them in court. She has just won an important precedent-setting judgment that will protect public-facing employees in every field, not just science, science communication. But despite the fact that she won, she still lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. And so now that her case is over, she has started a crowdfunding effort that will hopefully help her recoup some of her costs. So here's the page if you have a few dollars to contribute. If you don't, that is totally fine. I have already made a donation on your behalf simply for you watching, liking, and sharing this video. So thank you so much. I hope you stick around and listen to Susie tell her own story in her own words. Susie Wiles, thanks for joining me. Now, Susie, I know you very well, but a lot of my audience may not know who you are. So I'm hoping that you can give me just a quick sort of introduction to, what's your background? Where are you? That whole thing.
Super. I'm Dr. Susie Wiles. I'm a microbiologist at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. I'm originally from the UK, but I married a New Zealander, and so we moved to New Zealand about maybe 16 years ago. And so my passions are bioluminescence, so creatures that glow in the dark, I love, and infectious diseases. And so I've made a career out of combining those two things by making nasty bacteria glow in the dark and then try to use those to understand more about infectious diseases and to try and find new medicines. But I've also for a very long time, really understood that science doesn't end with a peer-reviewed publication. So for I don't know how long now, a long time, it's been really important to me to learn how to communicate about science in different ways to different audiences. So, I've used social media, was a blogger back in the day, and then have ended up being in New Zealand sort of the go-to microbiology expert whenever there's an infectious diseases story in the news. So if people remember the Zika pandemic and the Ebola pandemic, I was somebody who communicated about that. And then COVID hit, and so I became a science communicator during COVID. And it's really interesting that I look back now and I think of all that science communication that I did before COVID, it was like training to run a marathon I never knew I was going to run. So so I became a big science communicator during the pandemic. And because I'm so comfortable working in different ways with different kinds of communicators, like you and I remember one of the very early things we did was a video about the science of Christmas, so
that's right.
I love working with other people, and have worked with illustrators and artists in the past. And so when the pandemic hit, I teamed up with this amazing cartoonist called Toby Morris, and we made these graphics about COVID that ended up being used all around the world by the WHO. So you may well, if you don't know my name or you know me, you may well have seen one of our graphics. If you heard Flatten the Curve, we were sort of part of making that go viral.
little on the nose, but yeah.
That's me.
So walk me through how this happens for you, because so end of 2019, you're working in your lab at University of Auckland. You are also doing your science communication stuff. You're appearing in the media. COVID hits. Does the New Zealand government come to you specifically, or do you volunteer your expertise? How does that work?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so for me, it started with the media. So in really early January, I get my first call from the media saying, "Hey, tell us about this mystery pneumonia in China." And so I start doing interviews and start writing about it. So I still had my blog then, so I started using my blog. And one of the reasons I loved blogging was because it was a way that you could say everything that you were thinking, point to all the evidence that, whether it was papers or stuff. So people might hear you only say 60 seconds on a, TV or radio interview, but there was somewhere they could go and find that. And through that, I ended up writing for a little media organization in New Zealand called The Spin-Off. And so I essentially moved to writing to them. So from early January was basically writing and doing interviews. So in terms of consulting the government, so the government at the time, the Prime Minister had a chief science advisor, and so she would have been, all over that, and she connected in with people in the science community. So we were essentially giving, sound checking things for the chief science advisor, who was then Jacinda Ardern's kind of, the person who Jacinda turned to. The government then also set up all these sort of advisory groups. Now, one of the things about me is that because I'm not your traditional looking academic, I tend not to get involved in those kinds of things. I'm not asked to sit on all these panels and stuff. But I did get connected in with the Director General of Health, and I was actually recommending people that, hey, you should talk to this person about this and stuff. So I ended up having a direct line to the Chief Science Advisor for the Prime Minister, the Chief Science Advisor for our Ministry of Health, the Director General of Health. And then at some point there were government ministers who were like, hey, can we second you? And I said, you know what? I'd rather stay independent. So thank you very much. But I'll just, I'll let you know if there's anything you need to know. And there were definitely policy people, and everybody was reading my pieces for the spin-off. So there's, and I did get phone calls. I would get a message from the chief science advisor saying, hey, the Minister of Education wants to talk to you about this paper, like 5:30 in the morning. And so you'd get a phone call from somebody. Or I remember getting a message going, Jacinda wants to talk to you about fomites. Like, okay. And then the Prime Minister's on the phone talking to you about fomites. So it's quite, I guess because New Zealand's so small and we're quite connected, it was sort of loose and informal, but for me it was really important that I remained independent. So I didn't want to be seconded onto anything. I wanted to maintain my position at the university, and that meant that I could criticize when necessary, right? And I did.
Yeah, it's funny actually. In prepping for this, I was looking over some of your past articles and things, and I had kind of memory hold how rightfully critical you were, because as an American living through COVID under Trump was very frustrating. And I know I and many other Americans looked over at New Zealand and was like, oh, you guys are so great. Like, we're so proud of you. But by 2021, New Zealand was loosening restrictions, and you were quite critical of that.
Yeah. Which is why it still makes my mind boggle that people think that I was a paid shill for the government, that that they were telling me what to say. In fact, at some point, the leader of the opposition party, her office did these Official Information Act requests to our Director General of Health. And the way they were phrased was, we want to know, we want basically all communication between Susie Wiles and the Director General of Health, how much you were paying her for communication. And the first I hear is I get this ginormous PDF of like 600 pages of the emails between me and the Director General of Health. And it's mostly like, hi, so you might not have seen this paper, but this is what I'm going to start saying. This is how my messaging has changed. So you might want to read this.
Right.
Hi, can I introduce you to so-and-so? They're an expert in this field and you should probably talk to them, right? So it was really like the other way. It was me kind of going like, hey, if you haven't seen this, just make sure that you've got the most recent information. And of course, there was no money.
Right.
So that it was right before the election. There was obviously an attempt, I would say, if they'd found something, they were going to use it to try and damage the government or the Director General of Health. And they got nothing. Like, what they got, it was a great reminder to me, like, oh my God, I sent so many emails, but also like it was all the opposite direction to what they thought. But people still believe it. People believe I made millions from the government. And part of that might be because I was involved in a group called Te Pūnaha Matatini. It's one of our centers of research excellence, and they were the ones who ended up doing the COVID modeling. And so we did get contracts from the government to pay people to be employed to do the modeling. But all that money, of course, went to contracts to the university to buy out our salary. So we didn't get the millions. We were just on salary, and that money helped pay for graduate students and postdocs and stuff like that. But people are convinced that I've made millions and that I was a government shill, and it's like, and it's also really funny as well, because if you read anything I wrote, you would understand that my politics were way more left than than the Labour Party in New Zealand. So it's just wrong on so many counts. But
well, this brings me to a topic that I don't want to get too into the weeds on, but it is relevant to where we're ultimately going, which is that you as a science communicator who is also employed at the university, how much of the press you do, the public facing stuff, how much of that is a part of your job description for the university? Is that an integral part of your position, or is that just something fun that you do completely separate from your position at the university?
That is a great question, and is at the heart of what has essentially happened to me. So, as an academic, I'm on what we call a 40-40-20 contract. So 40% teaching, 40% research, 20% used to be called service, but it's now called something like academic citizenship and leadership or something like that. And so the science communication stuff was always sort of thought of being, well, you can kind of plonk it in that service component.
The 20, yeah.
The other thing we have in New Zealand is legislation called the Critic and Conscience Act. And that basically gives universities the responsibility of being what they call the critic and conscience of society. So it tasks universities with, having experts who can speak on things when needed. So we have this protected right. The universities have an obligation to do stuff like science communication. And we have a part of our contract that has this thing that you could put science communication into that bucket. For me, so because I've done it for so long, and it all really depends on who your line management is, whether or not they approve of it. And so for me, the problems really started gosh, probably back in like 2012, 2013. So I won a heap of awards, like the Prime Minister's Science Communication Prize. We've got a Royal Society of New Zealand. I won the Callaghan Medal, which is a science communication medal. So I'd won all these prizes for science communication. And my dean at the time was like, like, you're wasting your time. Like, this is not important. You're not doing the research you need to do. Which was interesting because actually when I went and looked back, I was as productive as all of my colleagues, but also doing this like really high level award-winning science communication. So there's an element of misogyny there about, women. We know this from the research that women have to be like 3 or 4 times as good to be considered even potentially equal, right? So
and there's also, even Carl Sagan went through that same sort of thing, a similar sort of issue where he was looked down upon by other scientists for doing any kind of public education. And so when you add to that the fact that you're a woman who does not look like a traditional scientist, yeah, you've got the whole deck stacked against you.
Yeah. So that deck has been stacked against me since 2013, at least, right? And so what actually ended up happening, so I didn't have a permanent post at the university at that time. I was on a fellowship and it was coming to an end and there were discussions about, so what's going to happen to me next? And what ended up happening was the faculty, so I'm in the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences and had this dean that did not really value science communication. But the Faculty of Science had a whole bunch of people who were like, Susie is amazing and we should give her a job. So I ended up having this position that was basically bought out. Part of my salary was bought out by the Faculty of Science, and they were like, you can just use this as your place, to do science communication. Like, we're paying you and it's all fine. So so knock yourself out. So that sort of gave me this protection and allowed me to go, super, I now feel completely, safe and I can do this. And that's what I carried on doing. And to the extent that by 2019, I'd been made a member of the New Zealand Order of Merit for services to microbiology and science communication. So it had been recognized at a national level. But there was always still this tension, right? That, is this really part of your job and stuff? And so when it came to COVID, it just became such a big part of my job that essentially what happened was I ended up with 2 jobs for about 2 years. So I was working from 5 a.m. till midnight, because I still had to write grants, supervise students, teach, but also we were in this completely unprecedented time when infectious diseases experts were needed, when science communication experts were needed, and I happened to be both of those things. And so for me, it just felt like this is a moral obligation to help people through this, right?
Right.
And I just could not fathom how there was still resistance towards me. It's like, and at the moment I'm thinking about writing a book, and I'm going back through all of my emails, and I'm just finding, at the time I was trying to push the media to other experts. So my emails are just full of me kind of saying to my colleagues, hey, like, I've had this media request, this is your area of expertise, can you do it? And inevitably they like take 3 days to get back to the journalist, which is just, if you know how the media works, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Or there's lots of them saying, so I've done this for 2 weeks, I'm done now, I need to get back to my research. And so, there were a few of us who were just left, like, if we hadn't done it, then who would there be? And from my previous experiences with things, when you don't have the expert speaking, that leaves a very large hole, and that hole gets filled with misinformation and disinformation. So for me, it was just this is absolutely part of my job, and I'm going to do it, and to hell with what everybody thinks. And and I still kind of firmly believe that. And I sort of thought maybe by the end of 2020, I felt vindicated. I felt like surely now everyone will see why this was important, why I'd been banging on about how everybody needed to learn to communicate and make relationships with journalists and get comfortable with this, when you're not in a crisis. It just became, I felt like, see, I told you. And if more of you had done this, there'd have been more of us doing it. And then it would have, wouldn't have been left to just a handful of us. But anyway, I digress. Yeah, so absolutely part of my job.
I'm going to cut all of that out and just have that last part. Yes, part of my job.
But what's astonishing is I had to end up going to court to have a judge say that. which I guess we'll get into.
We'll get there. We'll get there. First, I want to talk about, so you talked a bit there about how your colleagues and those at the university felt about you and what you were doing. Another thing that from afar, I did not see, because we were dealing with our own problems here in the US, where we had this very large scale, refusal to comply with even the most basic request at unselfish behavior. And one of the reasons why New Zealand was such an early example of success during the pandemic was because of strong recommendations and strong rules set in place to enforce social distancing at first, and testing upon arrival in the country, and so all I saw from afar at that time was success. But from your perspective at the time, whether this was in 2020 or in 2021 and later, did you see a significant portion of New Zealanders refusing to comply and seeing this as government overreach?
So, no. Not a significant number. So we actually, the polls done at the time show that the vast majority of New Zealanders were absolutely on board with what we were doing. Everyone knew it was going to be hard, and and we were all worried about what things like having a lockdown, what that meant for the victims of domestic violence, those who are needing school lunches to feed them and stuff, like, the homeless. Like, these were real considerations, but they were being weighed against what we could see happening overseas, which was very quickly hospitals being overwhelmed, people dying. So it was a sort of lesser of two evils thing. And we tried to communicate that really well to New Zealanders, and the vast majority of New Zealanders completely got it. And so there was this real kind of team feeling, and everybody sort of got behind it. But I think one of the things we mustn't underestimate is that showing that a liberal democracy could really quickly do something quite extraordinary, and I don't even know what a right word would be, but it's just a stark thing, right? If you'd asked us 6 weeks before, hey, so we're going to lock down the country, shut all our borders, and everyone's going to stay home, you'd have gone, you're mad, yeah. Right? And you would require the army on the streets to make that happen. And it didn't. People put teddy bears in their windows instead, right? So
right.
It showed liberal democracies could do this really drastic action if needed. And we have to be frank, drastic action is needed for lots of things, climate change and various other stuff. So I firmly believe that there would have been an incentive for bad actors to attack New Zealand for what they were showing the world could be done. And we saw this. We just saw this influx of disinformation. And, at one point there was more disinformation targeting New Zealand, like 3 times or something, than the US and places like that. So there was stuff being sent to New Zealand, and then it was essentially being repackaged by, the conspiracy theorists here. And we have to remember there's always people who are looking to make a fast buck, who are looking to push a particular agenda. And so they'll jump on anything. And, COVID was the thing that most of those people jumped on. And so we just saw this steady sort of whipping up of discontent by a small number of people to a small number of people, but they became very, very vocal. And then really for us, it culminated in an occupation of our Parliament grounds. And that really came from the protests coming out of Canada. So the was it truckers or something?
The convoy, the Freedom Convoy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that came from them. So basically that then came to New Zealand, and that really was the kind of beginning of the end for us, because they just, it was astonishing. So I went to see the movie Prime Minister last night. So this is a movie that's been made about Jacinda Ardern. It features a lot of home video footage because her husband Clark was, partner Clark was videoing her at the time. what you see in that is this kind of, you see the breakdown, you see these indigenous people, the Maori people, holding Trump flags. I mean, this is like, Trump doesn't care about you.
Right.
So there was just this disinformation and these people picking things up and then just running with it, and just creating, this sort of divide and it's not really a divide. I think most people just don't care about the pandemic now, right? They're mostly fine. And then there's this very small number who've gone down this very deep rabbit hole, and they believe, me, Jacinda, and other people, they believe we've killed millions of people. And honestly, I mean, there are only 5 million people in New Zealand. I don't know where all these dead millions are, but
yeah, there used to be like 50 million, but we don't talk about
we were hiding them.
So how did that, we saw here in the US how people turned on Fauci and made him a target, and I feel like a very similar thing happened to you and obviously the Prime Minister and others. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of harassment you were getting, the forms of it, and how it affected you and your family?
So it started in probably February 2020. It would have started,
that's fast.
It would have started with emails, and then obviously, comments on social media and stuff like that. So social media. And at that time, that would have been on social media that I was using. So I was a big Twitter user at the time. So it would have been social media on that, harassment on that, harassment on Facebook. But then we start to see this shift where people are now are using platforms that we don't use. So Signal, Telegram, all of those, all of those things that started to come about, Rumble or whatever they were, those platforms starting to congregate and really whip each other up. So there was stuff being said about me that I didn't see, but was sort of fomenting hatred, I guess, of me and others. So emails, just direct comments. I got doxxed, have been doxxed multiple times. So that meant then people had my personal phone number. So messages, I've got one woman, I've got messages from her where she's screaming, "You never answer your phone." It's like, well, yes, I don't answer my phone.
Yeah, this is why
I don't recognize. I wonder why. Phone. Our house was stickered with anti-vax stickers one day, so they did come to our house. I must say, the first time I was doxxed, I was very concerned because we were away at the time. My cat was home alone. I was a bit worried about the cat. But I was more worried that they gave our address but a picture of our neighbour's house. And I was like, God. Oh, God, what if they go attack my neighbour's house? Oh, no.
The first time I got doxxed on 4chan, someone sent it to me, and they had got my address right just 10 years too late. And I had to, I called the local police department in that city that I no longer lived in and had to explain to them why a random stranger might be about to get doxxed or might be about to get swatted because of me. And like, they did not get it. So I understand that feel. Like somehow it's worse when it's like just somebody who has nothing to, like, you are also innocent, but your neighbor
has nothing to do with this. So doxing, things like complaints to the university. So, making complaints about me. There were official Information Act requests for my qualifications. So there's somebody who didn't believe I had a PhD, and so they were making all these requests for that. So sort of like harassment in other forms as well. And then what else? I mean, all the I did unfortunately have an interaction with some anti-vaxxers, which was a purely chance thing where we happened to be staying at the same hotel. And I turned up for breakfast, sat down, and then suddenly thought, oh shit, I recognize that person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I was just like, okay. And then my breakfast came, and then the more well-known or conspiracy theorists turned up, and I was like, oh geez. And then they started live streaming me and calling for people to come and stuff. And then it was awful because he then did another live stream a few days later going, God, what was that? And I was sitting next to Susie Wiles was like sitting next to a pedophile, and it was just like,
oh my God.
Anyway, so there were some in-person interactions.
And in addition to
all of them.
yeah. And in addition to insults and things, were there threats on your life and safety, on your family's safety?
Yeah, but I guess it's never clear, like
how serious they are.
Yes, exactly. We did have at one stage, we had one white supremacist who was threatening to come on campus, and we told the university about that, and it was all like, well, but will he come? And actually, so we had this horrendous meeting with HR. We were like, look, yesterday he posted this video, like, what can we do about this? Can we increase security? And they were like, well, he's just posted a video. The next day, he came onto campus looking for us. And we had basically decided, because that meeting had gone so badly, we were not going to come to work. So most of us were not on campus. Yeah, so there's the I guess a lot of the threats are also people saying something should be done, wink, wink,
Right.
So you never know whether the person who's going to carry out a threat, like it's probably not the one who's sort of made it.
Yeah.
But there's just, just this week, people have sent me gallows and I don't know, is that a death threat?
Right. Well, and that brings me to, the crux of things, is that you have alleged and have now been vindicated in the allegation that the university fundamentally failed to step up and do anything to really protect you. What was that process like for you?
Okay, so I'm going to take you back to about 2017 when there were a group of women, academic women at the University of Auckland, who started receiving some horrendous phone calls and possibly emails making sexual and, death threats. And so we didn't get very far with the Vice Chancellor at the time. So a bunch of us got together and then basically asked for a meeting and sort of railroaded him. And these women just basically started telling him what had happened, how it had made them feel, and that university had to do something. And so he was a bit shocked and he said, okay, yes, we should do something. And so set up this thing they called the Gender-Based Harassment Working Group. And so it had people from HR, people from, I guess, security and things, and some of these affected women to try and come up with some policies that would support staff who were being harassed by people external to the university. Because the university had policies for, like staff, harassing students or students harassing staff or staff harassing staff, but nothing external. So in 2018, basically those policies were launched to great fanfare, emails going, if you are ever, affected by this, here's the policy. And what they did was, it was a really cool idea, was they started this group called the Staff Risk Intervention Team, or SRIT, which is kind of funny. And it had someone from HR, someone from IT, someone from security. I don't know who else, but it was supposed to be the one-stop shop that if you were being harassed, you could go to this thing and then, was it a physical security thing? Well, security would take that. Was it an email thing? But because these people were all together, they could discuss it, presumably they could coordinate.
Right.
So in the beginning of April 2020, somebody reminded me, because I'd had more than a month now of things, and things were ramping up, and there was all sorts of stuff that was really concerning me. And they were like, hey, remember Shrit? We should call them.
How could you forget such a memorable name like Shrits?
So I emailed my head of department saying, these are the things that are happening to me right now. Can you alert Shrit? Can we basically come up with some plans? And then... I know we were all busy in April 2020. That was when we were in lockdown, and as was most of the rest of the world, and we were teaching online. I understand that people were busy. So I don't think we got any response to that. And then, so a little while later, we're like, hey, we need some help. And then,
real quick, when you say we, because it wasn't just you, who else was involved?
Yeah, so at the time, it was me that was experiencing the harassment, but I was being supported by two of my colleagues.
Okay.
And one of them is the person who studies disinformation and knows all about policies. And then the other one was Sean Hendy, who was doing the modeling.
Right.
So they were supporting me, and the three of us were basically emailing, and so it just started this sort of process of like, hey, so this is happening, and this is what we predict is going to happen next. So can we meet, or can we come up with a plan to help support me and anybody else who gets caught in this, right?
Yeah.
And so this process carried on. We did have some meetings. It was just, it became clear quite quickly, I think, that they just did not understand online harassment at all, did not understand that it could become like, not only that it was a bad thing in itself, but that it could also lead to offline harm. That was something that seemed not to be understood either. And it really came down to a few key individuals who were just toxic and misogynist, frankly. And they just spread this thing about essentially the harassment was my fault. If I just stopped using social media, I would stop being harassed. It didn't matter that harassment was coming because, I had a colleague at the university who firmly disagreed with the country's response. So every time they went on the media, then I was seen as like the anti-him. So I would get a whole bunch of abuse stuff. So some of it, and some of it had nothing to do with my use of social media, right? It was if I did an interview with the news or anything, it would come. So there was just this fundamental misunderstanding, and a fundamental would not listen. It was so frustrating. So we tried that process of engaging with them over and over and over until the middle of 2021. So for more than a year. And then it just became, and by that time now, more people were being harassed at the university. So like the policy wasn't just for me, it was for everybody. Like we really needed this team to understand what their staff were facing and to respond appropriately. So the three of us filed personal grievances, basically, which essentially said, we tried to get a meeting with our vice chancellor. So she's like the top boss, but she wouldn't meet. She just said, I've delegated people to deal with this, meet with those. And it was like, we've been meeting with them for a year, it's not working. And of course, at this stage, our New Zealand's vaccine rollout is going full, blown. Like the response was, you should take some paid leave so that you don't feel obliged to communicate or something, that will protect you. It's like, I'm sorry, people need to understand what's going on because we're vaccinating right now. So, so she wouldn't meet. And that basically was like, right, well, enough is enough. We were going to file personal grievances. And so that basically said, we have lost confidence in the people that you've delegated. As part of that, we want to meet and resolve this. And
how'd that go?
She rejected them. But she did set up what became known as the quantum audit. So she did get an external company to come in to audit the policies, but they were sort of more an IT kind of, it wasn't really a proper security firm who could, who would go, stuff, online harm can turn into offline harm, and it is a harm in itself anyway. So that process started, but that was taking we're going to audit all the things, we're going to interview everybody. And of course, everything was still just getting worse and worse and worse. So we waited about maybe 2 months, and then we were like, okay, that's enough. And so we did the first part of the legal action, which is we've got this group, or this, I don't even know what we call it. It's called the Employment Relations Authority. And that's the place you go when you've got an employment dispute. And so we filed with them. And as part of that, you have mediation. So we asked for specialist mediation rather than just like the bog standard mediation. Because, we'd been essentially mediating for well over a year.
Yeah.
But the university rejected that mediation. So we just had the bog standard mediation, and that failed. And so basically what the Employment Relations Authority, we asked them essentially not to hear our case, but to move it straight to employment court. Otherwise, it was just going to have this 3-year delay and then probably go to the employment court. And so that was the first opportunity. We put our case. We said, okay, so this is the history of what's been happening over the last 18 months now. And this is why we think this is this is the dispute. Can you please move this to the employment court? But it was the first time we then got to see the university's hand, really. So what were they arguing? And essentially they argued that science communication wasn't part of my job. It was an outside activity, and that meant they had no obligations under the Health and Safety at Work Act, under legislation, to protect me because it wasn't part of my job. And so that was the first time I'm like, okay, all right, okay, now we see what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so the Employment Relations Authority, they looked at that thing. They found in our favor. They thought this argument that this wasn't part of my job ridiculous, and they said so. And so they gave us permission to move to the employment court. And that judgment came out at the end of late December 2021, and we basically had a month to file our papers with the court. Now, the thing about New Zealand is it shuts down in January. This is our summer holiday. It's Christmas. The weather's mostly lovely. We go to the beach. So I reckon everybody was just on holiday. And we expected to hear from the university to go, okay, all right, our bad,
yeah, you got us.
Let's sort this out. But we didn't hear anything. So that meant that we had to file our papers. And so we filed our papers, and again, we heard nothing. But that essentially started the legal process with the employment court. And then... So a couple of months later, we still hadn't heard anything. We actually asked for mediation without lawyers. We were like, okay, can we just resolve this, please? Because, of course, again, everything's just still getting worse and worse.
Yep.
That mediation failed, and then it was it's just okay. Yeah, so it ended up just this crazy... I don't even know how to describe it.
4 years of legal...
wrangling.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we ended up with a 3-week hearing in the employment court in, that would have been November 2023, which was when I had all of my experts, so disinformation experts, experts talking about this critic and conscience and the fact that this was part of my job, experts who could talk about the level of harassment, how it was, one of the highest. So there's probably me and Jacinda and maybe a couple of other people, what that looked like, how it was still there in 2023 and wasn't going away. We had experts who looked at all the university policies and were like, this is what a good response looks like, and this isn't, then it's not that. So all of that process, I had to pay for all of that. So we had that 3-week hearing when essentially the university conceded that, yes, okay, science communication was part of my job. But as far as they was concerned, this had been a collaborative process, and we now all had the policies in place to sort it out and everything. And I have to tell you this actually. One of the things that's frustrating about court is that once you've filed your papers, that's basically all the court see. And actually the university did pull a bit of shenanigans in the week or two leading up to the court hearing. They tried to put a whole bunch of new documentation in. And so my choice was to delay the hearing so that we could respond, or just to let them put it in. And it was like, it's already 2023, let's just get this. So they put all this stuff in, one of which actually turned out to be a doctored form of something that was already in. So we got to go, the dates appear to have been changed on this document.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway, but one of the things that was so frustrating was that on one of the days that somebody from HR was giving evidence about how amazing their processes were, I got a bunch of texts that morning saying, hey, Susie, where are you? there's some chatter online. The anti-vaxxers think that you're at a vaccine conference in Auckland, and I'm like, well, no, I'm in court.
Right.
I'm listening to HR talk about how amazing our processes are and how they're monitoring for threats against me. So,
Right.
I went and had a look and found that actually there were a couple of targeted people giving that. So I immediately text them going, hey, let the organizers know, let the university know, let's see this amazing thing leap into action to protect you. And what ended up happening, so the anti-vaxxers did turn up. Security escorted the prominent man out of the building, but left the prominent lady just to fend for herself. And it was
Wow.
like, I can't believe we can't tell the judge about this, that this is like the process is failing as HR is telling you how amazing this is.
And this is happening in real time and you can't tell the judge.
Yeah.
That's infuriating.
Yeah. And then we had to, so we have the hearing. Then we have to wait for the wheels of justice to turn. Mm-hmm. So in mid 2024, so it must have been, mid 2024, we get the judgment back. And the judgment is a bit of a mixed bag in that I'm the clear winner. The university have found to have breached their obligations. They're found to have breached their good faith obligations, actually. So we reported retaliation that had happened. So after every mediation, there had been some form of retaliation, and we put that in. And so she agreed that that was not appropriate behavior. So that was good. But she didn't, like, she accepted their evidence that everything was working fine now, again, because she hadn't seen it failed as they were giving evidence. So it was like so she didn't make any recommendations for changes. She just said, okay, you're clearly the winner. They clearly haven't done a good job. They're clearly, not, they have been slow and not proactive and stuff. And so she awarded me $20,000 in damages, which is probably about the most I could expect as well. So damages in New Zealand are not very high. And one of the things that our university argued is that I clearly hadn't come into any harm because I hadn't taken time off work, and, I was clearly fine. Like, I was worried if I took time off work, I would get sacked, right? So my resilience was sort of the thing that meant that I didn't get a big payout. Well, not that I would have got a big payout, but anyway. But because I didn't win every point, she said it's now for the two parties to negotiate on costs. So who's going to pay, like, essentially what should happen is the winning party gets a contribution to their costs. So as the winning party, we go away and we, my lawyers are like, okay, well, realistically, this is about as much as we can expect. And so they put an offer to the university and the university goes, no. The university says, you need to walk away right now with just the $20,000. You need to give up your right of appeal. Otherwise, we're going to come after you for $500,000 of our costs. And it was
how much were you already in the hole for after all these years of litigation?
Probably about $500,000.
Wow.
$500,000 New Zealand dollars. What's that? Maybe 300,000 US dollars?
$10, $20, I think. I'll Venmo you. It's fine.
So it was, it was a lot of money. And I was really hoping for some contribution to the cost, right?
Yeah.
And so, so they basically said no. And I was flabbergasted because I was like, but you've just lost. Like, how can you,
the confidence to say, we're actually going to come after you for costs? That's insane.
And the other thing, one of the tactics they used throughout the lead up to the hearing was financial bullying, right? They just did all sorts of things that I don't think you can classify as anything other than financial bullying. And so it just felt like, well, here we are again. You're just doing exactly the same thing. And the judge had said, if you can't reach an agreement, then obviously you have to come back to court. But that was going to cost another $15,000. So it was like, oh God, okay. Where do we find another $15,000 from? But I also couldn't believe, like, well, we just paid $500,000. Like, do you not think I'm going to try and find another 15? Like, what's going on here? Like, what did you think would be? Anyway, so we went back to the judge, and then she. So that was in probably August or September last year, And then we heard in the middle of this year. So they argued. So the university, they didn't come after me for their money. They just argued that it was a draw. And so it should just be like, that's the end of
You
it.
each go your separate ways.
Yeah. And so the judge had to actually say, no, it's not a draw. Susie was the winner. It's like, thank you, Judge.
Yeah, good.
And then she ordered them to pay me more than I had originally offered to accept. It wasn't much more, but it was more. And I just thought, thank you, that was nice. And I wonder whether she realized now that she'd maybe been she'd let them off a bit lightly the first time round.
A lot of this reminds me of something I talk about all the time, which is libel bullying, in which someone uses the court system to, even if they know they're not going to win, they know that the costs are usually so prohibitively expensive. And in many places, including, the UK and even in parts of the US, you can win your defense against a libel lawsuit and still come out in the hole. And so even with what the judge awarded you, you're still down. How much?
Over $400,000. That's
wow.
a win.
That's a win.
And I'll tell you what, when it became clear to me that the financial bullying was happening too, and I started getting emails from people saying, I tried to take legal action and had, ran out of money. Like, it's clear that this is a tactic employed by lots of organizations, right? That, if you've got deeper pockets and it's not your own money, like, you can just spend it, right? So I'm in the fortunate position of, we could afford it. We remortgaged our house. We're young enough that we were like, okay, well, if this really goes tits up, we're not going to have the life that we thought we were going to have, but we are not going to be out on the street. So we can afford it. So for me, it just became, I'm not going to let them bully me. They are underestimating me. Because when we started the legal action, there were two of us. So me and this other professor. And at our second mediation, he just decided he had had enough, and he basically settled and he left the university. And so that meant he left the legal action, which meant there was only me. So what had started with two of us sharing costs was now me on my own. And I think they were probably delighted when he settled, because I cannot see how they did not think there's no way she can do this on her own.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you have no idea. You have just seriously underestimated me. So I'm like, no, I'm going to show you that this is like, this tactic doesn't always work. And yes, okay, it has left me with a very large hole financially. But it was sort of a principles thing. And the other thing they tried to do so when we went back to the judge for costs, so before we went to court, they did what's called a call-to-bank offer, which is essentially to put an offer of settlement on the table and to say, if you don't take this, we're going to use it against you when we get to court. And that's exactly what they did when we went back to the judge for costs. They said, we want things to, frankly, because we made this offer, we should be able to come after her for our costs. And so a really important part of the judgment from my case was the judge put that call-to-bank offer aside. This has set quite a precedent legally. And because she said it was only a financial offer, it didn't offer any of the remedies that Susie was looking for. So this is a really important thing. And it was, the university tried to use this form of financial bullying with this offer. And the judges said, actually, it wasn't, this was never about the money. This was about the policies and about vindication. And so it was just like, yes! While also being $400,000 out of pocket.
Right. Well, and I plugged your fundraiser at the start of this. I'll do it again now. You are crowdfunding on pledgeme.co.nz or NZ, I suppose. And I highly encourage people to go there and throw money at you, because you are in not just in my estimate, you are objectively a hero who saved lives, not just in New Zealand, but around the world, thanks to your advocacy and your extremely like funny, witty, and precise method of communicating things like risks and what it means to flatten the curve and all of these things that would have been overwhelming became much more manageable for the average person because of your work. And the fact that you were doing all of that while still teaching, while still, applying for grants, running your lab, and while being the target of a vast hate campaign and fighting back against the university for failing to help you. The fact that you did all of that at the same time, to me, is just, it's astonishing. Even I know you. I do not underestimate you, but even knowing you, you did incredible work. And so I really want people, I'll have the URL on the screen. And so I very much hope that you are able to get back some of the money you lost doing this, because just like, your science communication, your illustrations and such didn't just help people in New Zealand. Winning this court case, I imagine, doesn't just help you. Obviously, like, it didn't help much at all in terms of money. But can you talk a little bit about the ramifications of this decision?
Yeah. So I mentioned already the call to bank offer. So that's a quite important thing legally around this sort of form of financial bullying. But actually, the big win was that if a company or an employer has public facing employees, they are legally obliged to support and protect those staff under our Health and Safety at Work Act. Like, that's just it. And so it's amazing. So it's a win for academics, but it's a win for the poor person who is monitoring the social media of any company, right? I mean, it's a huge win.
Right.
And so I'm absolutely delighted that we've finally got that in writing.
But it does see, it's incredible that I think it really illustrates how laws, not just in New Zealand, I think in the United States as well, have struggled to keep up with our current reality of social media and what it means to be online and what it means to be a public figure. Because now public figure, like you said, it could just be the schlub running the social media account for ding dongs. And our protections for these people, it's just lagging way behind. So it sounds like this case is a much needed precedent in improving the safety of employees like you and many others.
Yeah. I mean, I really hope so. I am disappointed that there wasn't sort of direction for, like, organizations should, like, get some help. I mean, one of the issues that we faced was that we had people who really just were out of their depth and wouldn't accept they were out of their depth and would not get expert help. Mm-hmm. And so, my plea is, if you're an organization, like, there are people who know this stuff, like, there are people who understand this, and one of the things that I get all the time is people going, but, like, what could they do? Like, how can they protect you from online trolls? And I understand that question. And I'm not the person to answer it because I'm not an expert, but there are experts. And actually, it turns out there's tons of stuff you can do. So, some of that stuff is around, how do you wrap support around somebody? How do you make them feel secure when they're being bombarded? And sometimes that is just stepping up and saying, hey, this is not okay. We support our staff. Like, that is just one thing they could have done. But another thing they could have done is provide training so if this does end up in a physical interaction, train somebody how to deal with that, because you know, people respond in really different ways to a very highly stressful situation. So some people forget how to use their mobile phone, like they freeze, they don't know how to move forward, they don't know what to do. And so if you're given some training in, right, you know, this is what you're going to feel, so how do you manage those feelings, how do you manage that adrenaline, how do you, you know, to do something. So there are people who run courses that's what they do, you know. There's tons of stuff. I mean, you know, monitoring for threats, you know, instead of leaving that for the affected people and their friends and family to do, you know, there's all reporting things to police. There's all sorts of things that organizations can do, and some of them do them really well. Like, there are organizations out there that do this, and one really stark example for me was when another one of my colleagues started being harassed. So as our vaccine rollout was happening, she also worked at the hospital, and so as soon as she told the hospital what was happening, I mean, the hospital are used to dealing with the potential for violent attacks on its staff, and so they just had a plan and immediately went into action. And so the contrast between the response from the university and the response from the hospital was really stark, and that's to do with what is an organization's experience, you know, who's in the room, who do they believe in this stuff. And so that's my plea, is that organizations just need to understand, because it's getting worse. Again, people think this is a thing of the past, but, you know, as soon as I went public with my crowdfunding campaign, like, it all came back. You know, I have not done any science communication for like 2 years. We have had no you know, health measures in New Zealand around COVID for 3. These people are obsessed. They want me dead, and they are coming back as soon as I lift my head up. So they're still here amongst us. And, you know, and with everything that's going on around in the world, it's getting worse and worse. The platforms are relying on this hatred to get clicks and engagement. So all of our organizations need to step up. And frankly, all of our governments need to legislate and make sure this stuff is dealt with just at the very core, right? You know, there's currently in Australia, they're basically going to ban under 16-year-olds from using social media. And it's like, so what happens when you turn 16? Suddenly you can deal with all this stuff? Like, a much better strategy is deal with the hatred on social media. Deal with these platforms, not ban young people from using these platforms. So sorry, I get a bit irate about this. And it's sort of part of me is like, this is my next cause, but I'm like, I'm tired. And someone else I will cheerlead someone else, but I can't take up this cause myself.
Which brings me to my concluding question-ish, which is that, you know, I miss your face. I miss seeing you around the internet. You have been noticeably absent, and I knew why. But I'm curious, you know, what are you going to get up to from here on out? Are you going to be back in the public eye at all? I understand why you don't want to be. I do miss you, but, you know, and even though, like, you have this lab that you love and have, you know, poured your heart and soul into at this university that completely failed to protect you. What's your future both there and in the public eye and in the world of science in general?
Lots of people have asked while I'm still at the university. And in fact, I went to an event a few weeks ago and we had to do introductions. And so I was like, I'm Susie Wilds and I'm still at the University of Auckland. And there was just this like huge, everyone burst out laughing and applauded. And the reason I'm still there is because I have done nothing wrong. I don't see why I should have to leave when everybody who made my life a misery for the last 5 years gets to stay in their much more highly paid jobs. And also, I mean, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and you know, universities everywhere are just collapsing. So there aren't really that many jobs to go to. And So I'm staying as a pink thorn in everybody's side. I'm staying. And so, one of the reasons I haven't been so active, certainly on social media, has also been because one of the forms of retaliation the university used was to trawl through all my social media posts and then use them against me. So for bringing the university into disrepute or something, which is hilarious.
Right.
But yeah, so it makes me second guess everything, right? As a victim of harassment, I'm always worried, if I repost somebody's stuff, if I draw attention to somebody, are they going to now, is somebody going to descend on them, the hordes descend on them? So it makes me second guess everything I do, which is not a nice place to be in. So I want to use social media like I used to use social media, which was to try and show the person behind the science. But I'm also still a bit nervous about that and about whether my employer will then use it against me in the future. But the thing that I am so passionate about at the moment, which is going to mean I do have to come out and be more public, because this is something that I want everyone to know about, is menstrual cups and reusable period products.
All right. Okay. I love a menstrual cup. Love it.
Okay, so let me tell you, and it dates back to before the pandemic. So this is actually what I wanted to work on in 2019 or something. So I got a call from a journalist saying, hey, this paper's just been published saying that menstrual cups are more dangerous than tampons. Care to comment? And I was like, send me the paper. This sounds really interesting. Now, I have to admit, as a microbiologist, I have always found menstrual cups just like scary, because I worry about the ability of bacteria to stick to them and whether that might cause infections. Okay, so that's that's the bias that I'm bringing to this product. So the journalist sends me the paper. I read the paper, and so the way they tested this menstrual cup, and what they're interested in is toxic shock syndrome, which anybody who's ever menstruated will know about because it's in every product leaflet.
It gave me nightmares as a 14-year-old.
Yeah. So it's a really horrible, horrible disease caused by a toxin produced by a bacteria. And it's very, very, very rare, because actually the bacteria is not rare, but the strains of it that have the toxin are very rare. And then it has to be under the right conditions to turn the genes to make the toxin on. Okay, so what they had done is they had taken tampons and menstrual cups. They had put them in plastic bags. They'd filled those plastic bags with the media that we grow bacteria. They'd added this bacteria that can make the toxin. And then they had essentially put them in an incubator and shaken them at something like 200 revolutions per minute overnight. And then the next day, they had measured how well the bacteria had grown and whether they were producing toxin. And it turned out that more toxin was produced in the plastic bags that had the menstrual cup than in the plastic bags with the tampon. Now, I don't know about you, but my vagina is not a plastic bag, and it isn't full of bacterial growth media. And
I was hesitant. I was hesitant to offer my perspective on this because I didn't want to, you got to keep some things private. But yeah, I actually don't have that little, the zipper that goes along the top. I had that. I was born without that, actually. So
me too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I read this paper and I was just like appalled. Like, this is not how you answer that question. So it made me go and read, and that'll be presumably what I said to the journalist, like, what the fuck, without saying fuck. And so I went back reading the literature going, okay, well, so, like, why is this a new story, and, like, where's all the studies? And it turns out there were no studies. There was, like, one study from the 80s testing menstrual cups in pretty much the same way. Menstrual cups aren't even made of that material anymore. So, like, this was, like, the first study published testing the safety of menstrual cups in, like, from a microbiological perspective. And I just thought, what the fuck?
Right. We've been putting these things in us for, a decade.
By that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
wow.
It made me go, oh my God, we need to fix this. Like, and I can think of some really, like, ways that we should do these experiments. So I started blogging about it and saying, hey, like, it would be really nice to do this in a sort of open science, crowdfunded kind of way. Was sort of getting myself ready to do that. And then COVID hit. And so that project just like...
Yeah.
But last year, somebody in my lab was like, hey, Susie, what about that menstrual cups idea? Are you interested in going back to that? So it's 5 years later, 6 years later, I'm like, let's have a look online and see what's been done. And there have been like maybe another 4 studies since then. 3 of them associated with a manufacturer of menstrual cups.
Of course.
Everything's fine. There's nothing to see
Everybody
here.
relax.
There's another study that goes, maybe there's some cause for concern. But they're still all done in a way that does not replicate what our bodies are like and how menstrual cups are used. So, like this is what I want to do. I've written maybe about 12 funding applications over the last, whatever it is, 18 months. I just got the last one rejected this week.
Sorry.
But it's just, to me, it's too important. I cannot believe that a device, as you say, that's used by many, that everybody says is safe and effective, hasn't actually got the scientific backing behind it.
Yeah.
And I want to be really clear. I think these devices are amazing. They are like, periods are expensive, both financially and environmentally. And these, tick both those boxes, right, of fixing those problems. So I want them to be safe to use. And we just need the evidence to say, how do you use them safely? So that has become my next passion project. And a crowdfunder coming to you soon.
Yeah. Once you finish recovering your legal costs, go ahead and crowdfund some science. I would support that because I wasn't joking. I switched to menstrual cups probably like a decade ago and never looked back. And
I'll tell you what worries me. So again, all these studies focused on Staph aureus, which is the cause of toxic shock syndrome. But what about urinary tract infections? What about pelvic inflammatory disease, which is an infection that often isn't even known what the infection was, takes 10 years to develop and can lead to infertility? So there may be things that, because we're women, will not be found out for another 50 years.
Yeah.
Like, why do we have to wait for the epidemiological evidence to say there's a link when we could actually science it right now? So that's where I'm going to pour all of my energy. Because frankly, what I think is going to happen is that bacteria can stick to them because that's what bacteria do. And it's really just going to be a case of what's the right way to clean them. And then everybody to know that, because from this little study that I've done, every company says something different.
Right.
And some of them look more worrisome than others. And then there's also what people actually do, and so I think what's going to happen is we're probably going to come up with this is how you do it safely. And then we'll need a campaign to go, and you need to do this.
Right.
Because if you don't.
It reminds me of, the problem we have with a lot of makeup products where, they're not necessarily well tested. And then the only people testing them are organizations like either the makeup companies themselves or organizations like Environmental Working Group, which is just there to kind of fearmonger about like, hey, there's lead in everything, your lipstick's killing you. And it's like, where is the actual science? And one of the problems with that is capitalism, because who's going to pay to fund these studies? Well, the makers of the menstrual cup will. Once the first negative study comes out, they're going to fund a new study that says, no, it's actually fine. So
new studies.
I love this new venture. I fully support it, and I wish you the best on it.
Thank you.
Susie, thank you so much for joining me. And one more time, I'm going to tell people to go and support your fundraiser at pledgeme.co.nz. And I think you're the greatest person in the world. And I want nothing but happiness and puppies and flowers for you.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.